Welcome to the Sellouts. I am James Schramm of Schramm Financial Group. Here we talk about all things good, bad, and ugly of selling your business. Today I've got Alex Bean with me, founder of Tandem and also co-founder of Divvy. And I'll give you, Alex, if you don't mind explaining a little bit about your background and how you got into Divvy.
Yeah. So I'm from Seattle. Kind of after college, got into a lot of different things, but ultimately landed in tech. I was building applications. And so when I moved to Utah, my friend and co-founder was like, hey, I have an idea for an application. Yeah. And from there, we started building the application in our minds. None of us were tech builders, and we were really just small business guys. And from there, we kind of built the app that we wanted to help us out, spend smarter and stay within budget for our companies. And it was that kind of start, really. I knew how to build the application and connect with Blake, and we said, hey, we need this for ourselves, and therefore other people need it. Let's go.
And so it was more like a personal need, and hey, this can solve problems for other people.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, we saw a few things happening, like the convergence of Venmo and Apple Pay. Again, this is like 7 years ago, and those were both new. And we said, okay, those two things mixed with our needs as a small business, and we're like, there's something here if we mash them all together, and that's where Divvy came from.
Yeah. That's great. And so as you started building, at what point did you figure out that this was obviously everybody's idea is that this is going to be a big business, but at what point did you feel like this was going to be a legitimately large business?
Yeah, it's interesting. So now I'm doing venture capital, right?
Yeah.
So I talk to a lot of people who have business ideas, and whether it's actual venture investing or someone that comes and they think it's venture investing, I think pretty quickly I can tell, like, oh, no, that's a great idea, but that's not a big idea, which is, by the way, I think sometimes people take offense to that. I'm like, no. Don't take me wrong. There's nothing wrong with like that business that does that product. It makes really good money, but you don't need an investor.
Yeah.
And so we can get into that. But for us at Divvy, Blake came to my house in February of 2016. And I'd say for the next 6 months, we started saying, what is this? What does it look like? Just reiterating all the time. And we started, really going in August. From the beginning, Blake and I, and if you know Blake's background and a little bit of my background, we were kind of like, this is either something big or it is nothing. There was never going to be a middle ground. And there was a lot of companies trying to do little bits and pieces of it. And ultimately we said, hey, it's an all or nothing thing. So we raised out of the gate and kind of went for it. But it was really because as we looked at the idea and what the actual product market fit was, it was the whole idea. It wasn't just this little piece. So we said, all right, let's go.
All in.
Yeah, it was an all-in situation.
Yeah, and so when you started, how long were you working another job, or did you guys just kind of quit right away?
I think I quit in August.
Okay.
So I had 1 month where we were in office, and I was still kind of doing the other thing, but I mean, I'd already mentally, it was like we had shifted over. So it was the 6 months of prep, and we had nothing, mind you. When we launched in August, we had no product. It took us another year and 5 months to actually build something that would go to market. So, I mean, before we really had anything, but August is when we left.
And did you bring in funds at that point, or do you guys just working off your own personal savings?
We had funds at that point. Yeah. Like I said, when we started, it was an all or nothing thing. Again, we were right market, right time, all that stuff. But we raised from friends and family, and we raised enough because we were able to do some product market fit to say, this is what we're building.
Yeah.
Do you want to swing with us? And those people got a pretty good size of the business. Yeah. But we raised a decent amount early on, and then from there we, kind of always raised.
How was that, raising money from friends and family?
It was. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't just say go take money from your friends and family, because the problem is now, if you raise from a friend that can afford to lose it, and they know they can afford to lose it, which is rare, because even though you think that they can afford to lose it, they might still act differently. I would be very weary of raising from people you don't want to ruin the relationship from. For us, it worked out great, and I've seen it work out great, but very often, what I would say is it ruins Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
You raise the money, it's not going where you thought it was going to go. You need more. You have bad news, whatever it might be. And the money will get in the way of the relationship if you're not careful. So I'd be very hesitant.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I worked with my father for a while, and we did a fairly decent job of keeping work and family relationships separate. But like you said, if that money in your situation, if it disappears, then that could totally, change relationships.
They did. Like I see a lot of people, like my brothers, work with each other.
Yeah.
Working with each other is one thing because you're both in the foxhole digging.
Yeah.
So you kind of both know what's going on. You can disagree, but you kind of at least are both there. When you take money from someone, they're gone.
Yeah.
And they'll give you the money in their minds. Like if they haven't done a tech startup, they don't realize this is a 10-year run. So if you took money and they're thinking they're going to get it back in a year or 2 or 3 or 4, like it's not close, right? Yeah. So I just think I would be very hesitant in raising money from people that you actually like and want to stay friends with, unless it is very clear, written down that this money is not coming back for X period of time. Yeah. And you might lose it.
And then you guys raised more money down the line. At what point did you realize, hey, we need to get some series rounds of funding?
Yeah, so the first real, like outside of friends and family, the Series A funding that came in, we weren't really looking because we still had some runway, but our product was just launching. We were starting to get good customer feedback, and a group we'd actually already pitched, and they'd already said no, had kind of heard some of these customers say good things, and so they called us and said, "Hey, I know you're not actively raising, but we want to do something." So I don't want to say they reached out to us, but to a degree, yeah, right? We didn't do a process. We didn't say, okay, it's time. We're running out of money. Let's go. Yeah. And I would say I tell them now when people are raising money, if you're going in to raise money because you have 3 or 4 months left of money, it's like your car is burning, you're driving off a cliff, and they're asking someone to save it. Yeah. And it's a bad position to be in. You need to have runway. You need to have, leverage on your side. When you're running out of money, you're in big trouble. So we raised money kind of opportunistically. It came to our attention. We raised it. We actually raised the next round like 4 or 5 months later because someone came in and said, "Hey, actually, we really do want in. We'll increase the valuation if we can get in," and we went with it.
Yeah. So I guess in that situation for that first one, was it just such a favorable valuation that you decided to go with it? Because you guys weren't even really thinking about raising
but we
money.
were. We did need money.
Yeah.
And we knew, again, back to what we were doing. We were taking on like Concur, Expensify, Amex, like every bank you've ever heard of. Yeah. So we weren't dinking around with like, oh, we need a machine and we'll go. It's like, no. We're competing against companies that have thousands of engineers, and that's one of the companies, let alone the 5 other ones over here to the left. So we knew we had to raise money. It didn't surprise us, but we just weren't actively raising it. And then as that came to our basically 1 or 2 people kind of approached us. We said, "Oh, okay, let's look at raising it now." We probably would have waited a few more months, but not that much longer.
Yeah. So with your co-founder, did you have any conflict of what valuations you're willing to accept, or when to raise money and when to give away equity and things like that?
Yeah. So my co-founder and I have known each other for a long time. And I would say what worked really well for us is I always knew he was quarterback and I was running back. Okay. And I think a lot of companies fail because they are vying for power, or who's the Steve Jobs and who's the Wozniak, or Paul Allen or Bill Gates or whatever it might be. And for us, it was Blake's original. He came to me with the concept, and we obviously developed it together. But it was his original core idea. He thought of the name Divvy before he'd even come to me. And then it was his friends and family that had raised that we got money from. Yeah. So I was under no illusion that hey, Blake, we should do it my way, right? Yeah. And so we agreed, I think philosophically, almost every time down the road, as we came to decisions like how much should we raise, what's the valuation. But it also came from Blake was in the first seat and I was in the second seat. And so I was there to give guidance, counsel, go back and forth. But ultimately, what Blake wanted at the end of the day was going to go.
Yeah. And then as you guys grew, you guys grew really fast, really. If you're talking about 2016, you guys sold in 2021?
Yeah. Can I actually say one thing on that? Because I think it's super important for whether you're a business owner, it's going to hold on to the business, or whether you're a tech company trying to scale, but specifically if you're scaling, if you don't know what your identity is, meaning if you have 2 leaders, 2 CEOs, 2 business owners, because a lot of good businesses start with 2 people and then they run the business and they both kind of own both and it's going well. You really do need to have an identity. I would strongly suggest those people to look themselves in the mirror and be like, who's in charge? Yeah. Who's the head coach? Who's the quarterback? Who's the running back? And if you try to have I'm using sports analogies because that's my world. But if you have two quarterbacks running two systems, trying to do it two different ways, you're going to maybe fail, but for sure slow way down from where you could be. Pick a path, pick a leader, and go.
Yeah. And did you guys have to like formalize any of that, or did it just kind of happen more naturally?
You can tell by equity, but that's a whole different discussion. But, he was CEO, right?
Yeah.
So I knew what that meant.
Yeah, great. And then going back to the other question, if, as you guys grew really quickly, I mean, going to an exit, really 5 years less than?
16 is when we started at 18, we went to market and we sold in 21.
Okay. So what was it? More of a factor of you guys running out of steam or just the right opportunity? What made you ultimately just want to sell completely?
Oh man, that is a long question. Ultimately, I think it was right fit, right time.
Yeah.
So we were in a market where we had a bunch of really strong competitors. We felt like we were performing really well, but we weren't dumb to know that we were the only innovative, fast-growing, well-funded startup in this space.
Yeah.
And from then the person that came to buy us, which was Bill.com, we felt like they were the other end of the table. Like we were doing cards, they were doing checking, and it was like, well, yeah, together it's a really good offering. So 1 + 1 can equal 3, 4, or 5, whatever. And right time, right? I look at businesses now from a venture perspective, and certain people are really good at getting a business from 0 to 1. Some people are really good at from getting 1 to 10. Some people can get it from 10 to 100, or what it might be. And I think for us, we felt like we could have done a ton more, but also knowing what we were really good at. And we're like, okay, this is the right fit, right time, right valuation. It's good for our employees. It just felt right. And so we said, all right, let's do it.
And did you guys prepare for that, or did they come to you, or how did that end up coming about?
We definitely, so again, another thing for us is as a tech company, there's really two ways. There's 3 ways your company is going to end. 1 is you're going to go public, 2 is you're going to get bought, or 3 you're going to go under. Mm-hmm. Basically, if you're like a VC-backed company. So obviously we didn't want to go under. That wasn't happening. But we'd always prepared to go public, which is like for years before the acquisition, have the finance team preparing the financials and the audits and the compliance, all the things you need to do so that when you go public, you can say, okay, we have this muscle, we know what we're doing. And in preparing for that, when it came time to get bought, because Bill.com had looked at us in our Series D, I think, like they had kicked the tires, they kind of wanted to invest. We took some money, a lot of secondaries and different things in that round. But when we took the money, they said, hey, actually, we don't want to just invest, we want to buy you. And we're like, oh, okay. Well, let's take a look at and see what that feels like. So we were prepared in the sense that we had been preparing for what an exit looked like, but not like, oh, we have to go find a buyer by Christmas or this thing's going to go on fire.
Yeah. And, obviously a lot of people want to go the IPO route. That's, I want to say the sexier route, and to some extent it can be more lucrative. Is there a reason why you decided to go more private sale than IPO?
What do you want? They're very, very, very different, right? IPO, like if you want to run this business for the next 10, 20 years and this is your identity and you don't want to give it up and you love it, then go for it. Be the leader of the business for a long time. That's not what Blake wanted to do, and I would agree it's not what I wanted to do. So when we looked at the appeal of going public versus the appeal of basically getting bought out, I mean, Blake stayed on. I didn't. I left the day we got bought, essentially.
Yeah.
It just fit us personally to say, we're going to sell because we don't want to be here for 10, 20 years.
Yeah. So after you guys sold, how did that day feel special, or did you guys go out and celebrate? What can happen there?
Yeah. So, I wish I could tell every element of the story, but I'll hint at some of them. There's this weird thing. You think it's going to be this pinnacle moment when you summit, like you get to a mountain, even if you've climbed a mountain, like I climbed right near, and I've used this analogy before. Even when you think you're at the top, you kind of don't know when you're at the top. And then even on that day it happens, it's really not the day it happens, because legal signed one day and money sent another day. And, there's a lot of things and emotions that happen in between. So I'll give 2 quick examples of this. I sold some secondaries, in a Series D. And so it was the first time I was getting real liquidity. Yeah. And it's supposed to happen on Monday. super excited about it. Monday comes, I'm all jazzed. Lunch comes, and I'm like, it's not here. I'm checking. It's not coming. And now, like by Monday night, it goes from like, I'm super excited and like quote unquote dreams are coming true to like, oh no. What if this is all not happening?
Yeah, what's going on here?
So Tuesday, same thing. Nothing's happening. It's like the wrong bank account. They could back out if they really, really wanted to. I had more stress in that like 3 days. I didn't get paid till Thursday. So I had more stress in those 3 days.
Yeah.
Like just the compounding effect of time. And so it was funny, by the time Thursday happened, I wasn't even happy about it.
Really?
I was more frustrated. I was more stressed. I was more like relieved. I wasn't like this pinnacle. Now, when we actually sold, we were in San Francisco. We'd signed the agreement. We were there to announce it in their earnings call. And even that morning there was drama where, their stock was plummeting and, we're starting to be like, hey, is this really going to happen? We agreed on this price, but the stock price is not on here. So the share, value is totally different.
Yeah.
So it was this like antsy, stressful feeling, which you're like, how is it that on the day we're going to sell that like, I've looked forward to my whole life. This is the reality. There was a point when we sold at the earnings call, the stock started to go up. There was like a couple minutes where we were super excited and, the hugs and all that stuff. My point though, and I've said this is like the one thing I said at Divvy all the time, which is things are never as good as they seem and they're never as bad as they seem. And that'd be my advice to someone selling it. Hey, I know it's going to be great. You are going to be excited, but just prepare yourself for it's not your perfect wedding day.
Yeah.
There will be something.
Yeah.
Some drama, some emotion. So just know that when you're at the top, just prepare yourself for some things that won't be that perfect because it's never going to be like that crisp, that clean, that easy.
Yeah. So Bill's a public company, right? And so this was a very public sale. A lot of business sales, unless you are a public company, people don't know the valuations. They don't know any of that stuff. How was it when people know, hey, Divvy sold for $2.5 billion?
Yeah.
How did that affect you?
I said this to my wife. I said, it's funny, I can see it. Like when I talk to someone, I can see that they either think I have way more than I do.
Yeah.
They think I'm a billionaire, just like I'm not.
Yeah.
So
they don't understand that.
Yeah, they don't understand the dynamics of dealership, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
But like I can tell, I could see it. Like for the first couple months after I talked to someone and a neighbor, someone I go to church with, whatever, old friend.
Yeah.
Like my best friend from high school texts me. He's like, "Oh, congratulations on being a billionaire." And I'm like, "Well, sorry to make you a liar." But what was funny is, on one hand, some people thought I had way more than I did, and other people thought I had way less than I did. And it was like, it was just interesting. Like, oh, that's weird. And some people that thought I had more, I felt this imposter syndrome. I felt like this, like, oh no, I have to let them know that it's not what they think it is. Like, I'm really proud of it.
Yeah.
But
as you should be.
It's not actually what you think it is. And so it was this really weird feeling of, they think I'm better than I am. And you're trying to like process that. And I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, it didn't change like my family, which is my wife and my kids. And, that my really good friends, have a sense or, whatever. Yeah. But there were some weird interactions where people asked for money or they.
I was going to say, did people come out of the woodworks?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, I'm a big proponent of having a team behind you. So like if someone asks for money, you don't have to personally say yes or no. Your team can evaluate it and say no. And there have been yeses, but can say no, and you don't have to be the bad guy. There were asks like, I won't go into them, but personal and people that you really love and they like want the money, and we'll get into the whole book thing, but it's like, it's not always the easy answer just to write the check. And then frankly, a lot of times it's the wrong answer, even if you have the money. And so it brings on a whole new world of evolving challenges, but yeah.
Yeah. We'll touch on the book in a second. One more question about the sale. With the sale, since it was a public company, was it all stock that you guys got, or was there any cash involved?
25, yeah.
25 stock?
Yeah, 75%.
75% stock and 25%. Was that just kind of what they were offering, or did you guys do a lot of negotiating on that?
It was always negotiation, but it was always going to be more stock.
Yeah, great. So you've written a book.
Yeah.
Factory for Good.
Yep.
What inspired you to write this?
Everything we're talking about. Yeah. I mean, sold. And so we sold, I can't remember the day now, or Tuesday, I don't know. And I was gone by like Thursday. First 2 months was like honeymoon. Like it was the summer. I got to spend time with my kids after many, many years. And it wasn't just Divvy. Like I had been in startup mode for, 10 years. And I was just like, oh, you know what? No one talked to me about anything work at all. And it was great. Like loved it. And then my kids went back to school in like September. And I started being really bored. And not just bored, but I started to have these feelings of like, what am I going to do? What is my purpose? Where am I headed? All the classic, like, esoteric, like big questions. But I was feeling it. Like I'd go to bed at night and I'd tell my wife, and I'm like, I don't feel good. I'm not like as happy as I was like 6 months ago. Is that weird? And as I tried to process it, I was like, man, yeah, how do I navigate this post-life world? So I really started interviewing other people that had been through those situations. I have family experience through my grandpa and great grandpa and stuff that had gone through some of this stuff. So I started to go through my own experience, and then I started interviewing other people from their experience, and I started to gather some awesome stories from these other people. And I was like, there's a playbook in here. There's a framework or a structure to help people navigate kind of the post-exit life. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go for it. So after gathering some stories, I decided to see if I could actually do it.
That's great. And did you feel different over time? So obviously the honeymoon phase, that lasted a few months. And then did you get to a point where you thought differently about work? Were you planning on going back to work, or what were your thoughts after that?
Yeah. So in the book, we use the term Money Mountain, like once you've quote unquote climbed Money Mountain. And by the way, there's no like number to it. It's just when you're trying to hit whatever goal you have and you hit it, it's like, okay, now what do I do? And I think for a lot of people that are driven to build a business, it's like, well, let's keep doing that. They just know how to climb Money Mountain. For me, my grandpa did that. And his life went really negative with money. And it kind of ruined his family, and there's a whole story to that.
Do you want to dive into that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like the story is, I have a great grandpa. We're talking like 30s through the 60s, way long ago. Built businesses, was an executive at Safeway, and then ended up building kind of a retail chain. And he was highly successful, and everyone like still talks about him. I'm like 70 years later. Someone called me a year ago. It took me out to lunch to tell me how much my great grandpa had changed their life.
Oh wow.
He'd done all these amazing things.
Yeah.
My grandpa took that same business and scaled it to be way bigger, was way more successful. I mean, as successful as you can think of for the 70s. And money did the opposite for him, right? He was very accomplished in the world of money, but his relationships, ultimately died alone in an old folks' home. 3 of his 4 kids died of drugs and alcohol. Everything you can think about the, quote, negative effects of money occurred to him.
Yeah.
So I sat there and I'm like, I don't want to do what my grandpa did. I want to do what my great grandpa did. And it was that whole like, well, my grandpa just went back to work and he kept working for the rest of his life. I don't want to do that. So I wasn't trying to run back into work, but I also wanted to have purpose. And so I was trying to wrestle with that. Like, how do I get purpose? How do I figure out what I want to do? Ultimately, why I landed on Venture is I love working with young entrepreneurs and trying to help them have a similar experience to me, or if I can give them my playbook to give them an opportunity to build what I built or bigger, then great. And so part of it feels like a charity to me. It's like a nonprofit. Can I give back to them?
Yeah.
And it happens to be a great opportunity to also, make money. And there's a whole factory for good element for it. But yeah, I love what I do. Yes, there's money involved, but I love what I do. And I was trying to find that passion for something.
And as you were writing this book, what's your favorite story, I guess I should ask, of somebody that you interviewed?
Okay, so let's try to focus it, because there's 3 pillars of the book.
Yeah.
One is purpose, which is kind of what we're talking about. What do you do right when you exit? And you go through the 4 stages of an exit, and the first one's honeymoon and then loss. So there's that. Second one is relationships. How does this affect you? Like, if you think about the saddest person in the world, and maybe this is a little dramatic, but just stay with me. The richest person in the world who flies on his own private plane and has everything, on that side of things, but has no one to share it with. Like, I promise you, because I've talked to these people, it's really, really sad.
Yeah.
And relationships, like and yet you find people that have nothing, no money, no food or whatever, and yet they have great relationships and they seem to be the happiest people you've ever met in your life, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you go through a money or financial transition but keep on to those relationships? The third thing is legacy, which is ultimately like, what do you want to be remembered for? What's the impact you can have outside of your immediate family? And so for me, each one of those pillars has like a really interesting story behind why that's so important. So like, for example, one of my favorite stories, I talked to a guy, get on the phone. I'd heard a lot about him, but I never met him. And I said, all right, like, here's what we're doing. And he goes, well, here's what I want to teach you about money. Like, son, he's an older guy. And he's like, shared assets are going to ruin families. I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
He's like, well, passing money down to your kids, giving them a business, giving them land, having a cabin, pick it. It's going to ruin your family. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because in my mind, that's what we all work for.
Yeah.
You work to have money, to have a cabin, to have memories, or to whatever, to pass money down to your kids. And he goes on and tells me, like, this one example he gives me is, he goes, so let me explain. There's this, in our city, there's a local land that a grandpa gave his kids. Great property, gave it to his kids. Like, that's all he died with. He's like, here's this land, this is your inheritance. And, proud grandpa gives it to his kids. His kids have it. They start to fracture because they're like, well, the other one got the better land. He divided it in half, and they're like, well, that land's better than our land. And they both thought the other one had screwed over the other one. And now they're on the third generation, and he's like, I happen to keep my horses on this land, so I know all the families. They're Hatfield and McCoys. They hate each other. They don't talk to each other. They despise each other. He's like, think about that grandpa that passed on his inheritance to his kids, proud as can be, and it literally is the ticking time bomb in his family. Wow. And he gave a few other examples of, and you're just like, the dream that we all have is
just kind of crumbled your idea.
It's a lot of those stories where you like talk to people who've seen it, and they're not deceived by the allure of what money can be, but they understand the negative and positive effects that are very much right in front of you. And it's awesome. It's super fun to like listen to those stories, and I try to convey it the best I could in the book.
So what did you learn out of that? Like, how do you have those type of assets and be able to, obviously they're going to be passed on to some extent, or you can give them all to charity, right? But like,
well, so for example, the reason it's called Factory for Good, the book, is the concept was, well, we all like, you wake up every day and you spend your time and energy trying to achieve what? Like, what are you trying to produce?
Yeah. I mean, on the different levels, on my family, trying to provide for them and provide experiences for them.
Yeah,
right?
But you're trying to provide.
Yeah, trying to provide.
So to provide, you need to make money.
I need to make
right?
money.
Okay. Yeah. So people like, I think a lot of people talk about money as a super negative thing. It's like, stop it. You need to make money to like have shelter and necessities and safety and food. So stop it. We're all trying to make money. So you're trying to make money. So your factory is producing money. Your output is money. Okay. And at some point, if you're lucky enough to sell a business or hit some financial milestone, at some point, money doesn't have to be and shouldn't be your output. Money now needs to be your input. So money with your time and energy can go into this factory, what you do every day, and what you're building, what you believe in, and what you produce can no longer be money. It needs to be good. Now, good is obviously can be defined by who you are, and we want people to go on a journey to figure out, no, stop focusing on producing money. Start focusing on like, what is it that you want? What impact do you really want to leave? Now, for me, like I'm going through the process right now, but the factory I have is like we're setting up. Actually, I'll use Cotopaxi just because they're a better example. So Cotopaxi exists to eliminate poverty, right? Cool. Love Davis. Think that's an amazing mission. So its entity of Cotopaxi is not designed to like, how do we make more money? Its entity is how do we build more product to make more money to eliminate poverty? And I want to apply that same thing to business or to families and to, people that have these experiences to say, you're some of the smartest people in the world. Don't sell your business and go sit on a beach. You can sell your business and you can sit on a beach, but retool your factory to have an output that produces good. And that might be education. That might be water. It might be whatever, adoption, whatever your definition is. But now you can involve your kids in it. You can involve you and your spouse in it. Now your money has an outlet that is more than just currency to provide for yourself. So that's really the mission of like what we want with Factory for Good.
That's great. How has this transition affected your family? As post all of a sudden, do your kids know that you guys are, fairly well off? Or
my oldest is smart enough. She's 14.
Yeah.
I definitely don't share numbers. I don't think she has any clue on what Divvy sold for or anything to that effect. But we have moved houses. But like
on purpose to kind of remove yourself?
No, that's not fair. I mean, we just, we had been wanting to move anyways, and we ended up finding a place that we wanted to move to. Had more property and stuff like that next to some friends, and we moved. But, I think that they are smart enough to know that we have means. My 3 youngers, I don't think have any context as to what that means, which is great. I mean, that's the goal, right? I don't want them. I mean, I honestly could say when we first started, I would joke that my wife for the first year or so after the exit would have pressed the easy button to go back. She would have been very scared to tell me, but the reality is if she would have given it an option, she would have gone back to years prior just to be where we were at, because she just loved that life. And the complications that came and the nervousness that comes to her about, well, how do we raise kids? They're not spoiled freaking brats and super entitled. That is very consuming to her. And so trying to figure out how do you give them opportunity but not ruin them is, again, very much part of the discussions in the book. But it takes a lot of energy. And so I hope we're doing okay. I have no clue. I'll tell you when they grow up.
Are there any specific things that you guys are implementing to?
Yeah. So the other thing, so we call it the bank of mom and dad. It's in the book. And it's like my kid, 14, my daughter, she has to learn how to pay for her own things, right? So if she wants to go buy clothes, maybe for back to school, we'll give her some money. But we're very clear. You want to go to a movie, we'll pay for half the movie. You got to pay for the other half. Okay. So she has a job. So my 14-year-old cleans the gym, across the street. She's got to make her own money. And we're like, these are the things we'll pay for. These are the things we won't pay for. These are the things we'll pay half for. And it's a written agreement that allows, them to know, well, if they want something, my son wants baseball cards. He's 9. Okay, great. Well, here's a list of things you can do to go make money.
Yeah.
Go figure out how to produce value, and you can buy what you want. So, again, I'm positive we're not perfect. I'm positive there's going to be things that we miss, but it's a lot of those discussions of treating them as if we didn't have any money and saying, okay.
So I've got 3 kids of my own. I know I can lay down rules, and then there's still squabbling of no, that's not fair. I mean, do you guys fight? Do the kids fight about it?
I mean, obviously.
Yeah, that's great.
I would say to a degree, especially my wife, we'll call her the no mom on this one. She keeps her kids super grounded.
Yeah.
She didn't grow up with much. She grew up quite poor. And so she worked from a young age and bought everything and super independent, which I admire just tremendously about her. But so when our kids say, what happened yesterday? Our kids wanted something. And she was just like, no, the answer's no. Life, it says no. Yeah. And her point is when she was poor, they couldn't go to Hawaii. Yeah. They literally didn't have the money. So life just said no. And so it wasn't well, it's not fair. It's well, it's just reality.
Yeah.
The difficulty comes when you have some money is you're my daughter's well, I know you have the money.
Yeah.
I know you can afford this $20 shirt.
Yeah.
And I'm yeah, I know I can too, but we have to agree to it. So it honestly takes a little bit more work to be yeah, I know I can, but I'm not going to, and you have to understand why.
Yeah.
And that takes a little bit of context and work.
You feel as you explain that they're starting to catch on. They're starting to
I try to be very clear that I'm positive we're screwing up elements, but my 14-year-old will come back and say, all my friends got X, and I'm sure she's lying, by the way, but she's all my friends.
It's always all or nothing. Everybody got this.
All my friends' parents bought them $60 Lonely Ghost sweatshirts. And I'm all of I have to give all of them. She's all of them. I'm great. Well, I'm not them, and I'm not doing it. Yeah. And so, but that causes conflict. But we are trying our best to well, the written agreement says we'll pay for these things, but not for these things. If you want that, I'll pay for half.
Yeah.
So go make $30. Have responsibility. Have skin in the game. And I'll give you opportunity. Yeah. And I think, when I talk to people about how to hand money down to your kids, when you're going to die or when you're alive or a business, or even a fascinating one I love talking to people about is okay, 16. I would say a lot of people in America, it ultimately comes down to, hey, when you're 16, what's your mode of transportation? Let's just use car, for example, right? Okay. How are you going to pay for your kid's car when they turn 16?
I'm planning on splitting it halfway. That's what my dad did with me. He bought half of it and I paid for the other half.
Okay. So when your kid says, I want a Lambo, you're like, great, come up with 100 G's and, we might have this conversation or whatever. And it's amazing, though, through these conversations, how many people did it differently. The ones, though, that I saw go horribly wrong was some form of the conversation saying, well, my kid works really hard in school and they're busy, so I'm going to pay for their car and their gas and their insurance. And it's fine. Like it almost always ends poorly. Tickets, crashes. It doesn't matter. By the way, you're teaching your kid this major purchase in life. They didn't have to work for it. They just got it when they got 16, like giving your kid a car when they're 16. What are you doing? This is an opportunity to teach your kids about investing, about budgeting, about saving, about, hey, I'll help you. Like you're splitting it. Yeah. Great. Like that's a great concept. So if they go make $5,000, you'll give them $5,000 and now they have a car. Is it their car or is it your car?
Well, until they pay it off, I mean,
so they're going to pay you?
Yeah. So that's how it actually happened with me is if they want like full control over it, then
they got to buy you out.
Then they can buy me out. Yeah.
Okay. So, but even that, it's like, okay, whose car is it? Right. Yeah. And people have to understand your 16-year-old, like they're going to grab, the analogy I use is like, they're going to the ATM machine all the time. And if the ATM machine gives them money, even every like third or fourth or fifth or sixth time, they're going to keep trying the ATM. Mm-hmm. You have to teach your kid, like, no, it's not your car. This is mom and dad's car. You might own half.
Yeah.
But if you want to sell it or you want to take it to college, then you're going to buy me out. And again, I'm not even against, if you wanted to say, you know what, we split, but it's your car. But define it. Write it down so they know what their responsibility is. If you crash this car, I will not split the next one with you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you think that person might take it slightly more serious than the person I interviewed who said he gave his daughter a Porsche at 16? Who just, guess what, shocker, crashed it in like 3 months. It's like, well, yeah, because they're like, oh, shoot, this whole dad splits it with me goes away if I crash it. Yeah, I'm not going to be an idiot.
Yeah.
So I just think that people with money don't think about what they're, about these opportunities to teach when they ultimately,
or like what the ultimate output is of these type of decisions, right? And I agree. I think making your kids work, I want my kids to work. I see too often that parents, and they have the best intentions, right? Most parents want the best for their kids, and they think that, all right, we're gonna let them focus just on school, but there's a whole other aspect of life, which is money. Can I actually give
you, this is one of the saddest stories and that I came across. So mom and dad gave their daughter money, very similar in high school. It's like, oh, she's in high school. It's not a big deal. And, so they pay for a lot of her things. Nothing crazy, but they paid for her stuff. She goes to college. It's like, oh, she's going to college. Okay, so we're going to pay for her school and her rent and her transportation. She's going to college. She's busy. And then it was like, there's always a little money here and there. Again, nothing crazy, but just constantly supporting her. After college, she didn't really have a job, or I think she got like married, but her and her husband really couldn't support. So they were always like, oh, well, I'll help a little. It's just constantly like giving it. But the reality is like they never taught her from 16 on how to be on her own.
Yeah.
So fast forward, what ends up happening at 30, with all this back and forth, mind you, how many thousands of dollars and help and constantly letting them, letting her stay. She gets divorced, so she's single, and she's 30, and the parents are like, okay, enough is enough. Like, we've got to stop paying. You've got to figure it out. What do you think the reaction of the daughter was?
You don't love me.
You don't love me. I'm never going to talk to you again. Yeah. I hate you. So these parents are sitting there like, wait a minute, I do love you.
Yeah.
That's why I helped you for, 30 years, but for 15 years financially, I did it because I loved you. And now they're like, don't talk. Oh. She's, off on her own. And there's this big gap. And now instead of like, oh, it's, we're figuring out, it's like, no. The entire relationship that they didn't want destroyed is destroyed. And hearing from one of the siblings, the daughter's now like living on their own, I think is like a therapist, a physical therapist. And they're starting to make ends meet. And there's all this confidence coming to them because they're like, I think I can do it, like I can pay my bills without my parents. And the funny thing is like they were both better off if from 16 and then at 20 at college or whatever, the parents were able to say, hey, we might help you here, but we're not going to help you here. You have to learn to swim. Because when you fast forward that down, and you see a lot of this lately where a kid, lives at home till they're 26 and then 30, and how do they get out? How do they, the failure to launch concept? And it's like, well, the parents are enabling that a lot. And it ends up in disaster when you say, hey, it's time, I'm going to cut you off. And it's not great.
So let's move on to kind of the legacy portion of this book. What's kind of the main focus or lessons learned when you're talking about legacy?
To create a factory for good, and to figure out the impact you want to have on people. I'd say we call Circle A like your wife and kids, or your spouse and kids. Circle B is like, friends, family, people that are more extended, but you care and love about. Circle C is like the people beyond that.
Yeah.
And we want people to go through their factory for good finder and to really figure out what they care about, and to start to isolate. Oh, I really care about opportunities, teach people how to create businesses. And by the way, the other fun thing about this is I wrote it for people post-exit.
Yeah.
But I wrote it in a way, hopefully, where a lot of people that are maybe not in that same situation, or even thinking about building a business, or even like a stay-at-home mom read it and was like, yeah, like I have time. I don't have money, but I have time where I could impact people. So they went through the factory for good experience to think like, what's something bigger than me where I can go create an impact so that my kids know what I care about, and it wasn't money.
Well, I feel like that's like a muscle, a skill or something to learn, because there's a lot of people that have tons of money and they still don't give it away. They still don't do good with it. You can say it's all about themselves and the family. And I'm not trying to denigrate that, but I think it's something that you need to learn at an earlier stage in life before you get to that point.
I would denigrate it to this. Like, again, I'm not saying like don't do fun things, don't have nice cars, don't have big houses or whatever. This isn't saying sell all you have and give to someone else. But if your focus is build more money, build more money, build more money, and this is what my grandpa did, and then you die, what did you pass on to your kids? The love of money.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, kids, here you go. Here's money, which, my dad didn't inherit. But have you read Entitlemania?
No.
Richard Watts, great book. Like anyone should read it. Really, anyone. It has kids. Yeah. And one thing he talks about in the book is within 90 days, kids forget that mom and dad gave them the money and it's just theirs. And they now feel entitled to it. Have you seen the Rupert Murdoch stuff?
Yeah.
So he's trying to change his will.
Yeah.
By the way, of his money that he created, and his 3 kids are suing him. What are we talking about? Right? Like his kids are suing him for like his estate. It's like they didn't do anything to it.
I've got a client that's his situation. He's selling his business, and he had, told his kids that they were going to get portions of this, and things kind of changed because the business was actually struggling. Sure. And he was having a hard time making ends meet.
Yep.
And his kids are going after him.
Correct.
It's like,
it's insane. but my point is like, whether or not you pass your kids an asset, that's a whole separate discussion.
Yeah.
But you need to pass, like we talk about writing a legacy letter. So for my wife and I, it's like sitting down and writing, here is what we care about. Mm-hmm. So yes, we want you to know that, we want to do fun things and create memories. We also desperately hope that you know that we cared about these 3 things and this was our good. And we've been donating to these things, and here's how we're reporting on it. So when we die or when we're 60, you can look back and be like, oh, wow, grandma and grandpa like spent a lot of time, energy, and money giving to these charities because this is why it meant a lot to them. And pass down your values. Don't just pass down your assets. So figuring out what you want to actually do, what your good is, I think is super important, wherever you're at. Because if you just have time, you can start actually saying, wait a minute. You shouldn't just passively react. I'll give you a good example. There's a guy up in Salt Lake. His name's Joseph Grenny, like one of the biggest studs out there. And he goes, Alex, one of the interesting things about charitable donations is they're almost all from, like, if you look at the board of the charity and then look at who their friends are, those are the donors.
Yeah.
Meaning, and I've seen this in my own life, and I know I've seen it in a bunch of other people's lives that have some money. They actually don't care about the cause. They're doing it because their friend asked them. They said, here's some money. I'm like, oh, what a bummer.
Yeah.
Like, go find something that you're like. And so his charity is actually one that I've like fallen in love with. And I bring my kids to events. My kids know why we're donating to it. We're passionate about like, oh, this group, they open up a donut shop. So I'll tell you the full story, and I know we're running. So my daughter's 14. And I want her to know these things, but she doesn't need to know numbers. This group is about helping drug addicts and homeless people find opportunities to build themselves up on their own. So they create businesses to put them to work that helps them create value and establish their own personal value and create money. So they created a donut shop. It's called The Other Side Donut Shop. And it's run by homeless people. Like, it's run by people that are barely off the streets. They put them in homes, put them to work. And they needed money to open up this donut shop. But once the donut shop's open, the business pays for everything ongoing. So it's not this like charity that's constantly asking for money. In fact, they don't want it. They're like, the business will pay for it. Yeah. So we donated an amount that helped open up the donut shop, regardless of the amount, by the way. The donut shop held their grand opening, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. And so I drive up with my daughter and, see this big, like you see the homeless people like behind the counters running it. Like the place looks amazing. And I'm like, hey, do you know what this place is? And I explained to her what this place is. And I'm like, this is why it's so cool. And she's like, oh, that is really cool. I'm like, that's why Mom and I contribute to this. Because we believe in giving people second chances and helping them, create value. And so we had this conversation where she's like, oh, okay, Mom and Dad care about that and not just, whatever vanity thing that, we're doing, and helping her point her mindset towards like, oh, what other things do I care about? And so we'll start to engage her. And I have some really cool people have talked about getting your kids involved in picking charities and in younger ages. And again, making that muscle something as a part of your family of service and love and looking after things bigger than yourself. I just think at the end of the day, if you pass down an asset, it's a ticking time bomb. If you pass down values, then you have sustainable, generational, increase.
Yeah, I love that. And I love kind of your spin as well of, you're not just giving away money. Obviously, giving to charities is important, right? But you've started a VC firm to kind of help grow other people, right? And so I kind of view, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of what you're doing, like you mentioned earlier, a little bit on the charity side. Not that you're not getting paid for what you do, but also trying to help going forward.
So I'll give you an example of some other people without using me. Because again, I have a fiduciary responsibility to get a return for investors. So I have to, there is money involved, right?
For sure.
But so what inspired the whole concept actually for Factory for Good, there's a guy I really respect. He has like a real estate empire, a lot of money in real estate. And I said, why do you work? And he's like, well, I do it because we have these rehabilitation centers that we're really passionate about because, one of their kids had drug issues. And so they said, like, the more money we make over here, the more buildings we can build across our state. I don't want to just, disclose who it is. The more buildings we can build across the state so people can, we can give away. Yeah. So he has this for-profit entity and he's like, I'm good at making money. I know how to do it. I'm still young enough to do it. I can give people opportunity around me and give them equity in my entity. But he's not saying I need to go run a charity. And that's great too. But he's like, I'm running this for-profit because I can take the money from this for-profit and I can put it towards this entity, this nonprofit rehab, center that they do. And so his motivation, his output of this factory is good. And so he's using his resources. And I feel like this for me too. I'm not a nonprofit guy. I don't know how to run them. I don't know how to really, I'm sure I could try to figure it out. I feel like I'm better suited to build a business, but my responsibility is to not do what my grandpa did and not just keep making money to have more money and to buy more things, but it's to create more money, to create more opportunity, to go to the things that I care about.
Yeah.
And I think that's like my passion plea for people that are successful enough to get here is like, dude, die with zero. Like, you don't need to pass your kids down whatever millions of dollars you want to pass them down. Pass your values. Spend the money on experiences. Do some fun stuff, but give the money to people that need it. And, that would be my plea is like, go figure that out. Go spend the next 30, 40, 50 years doing that.
Yeah, that's powerful. Any stories or experiences that we didn't cover that you wanted to highlight?
No, I would say, for people that are contemplating selling their business, I would ask themselves, well, why are you building it? What do you get out of building it? And then what do you expect when you sell? And go through some real introspection of like, are you ready? Because I talked to someone the other day who sold their business and he's like, I wish I hadn't, And other people, I think they wish they would have, right? So there's no right or wrong answer, but I would articulate it on paper. What do I want from selling? Well, I want money. Well, why? Well, I want freedom. Well, why?
Yeah.
To spend more time with my kids. Okay, well, then are you prepared to go run your kids to soccer practice and go to school? Because you haven't been doing it for 10 years. So are you prepared? I wasn't prepared. I'm like, I hate this. So yeah, best of luck for all the people building the businesses. It's super hard, but it's a journey, and I wish everyone the best of luck.
Where do they find more about Factory for Good?
Factoryforgood.com. It's all free. Again, the book's not free, but come and there's a bunch of content. We have a bunch of experiences, the Bank of Mom and Dad experience, the Happiness Auto experience, the finding your good. We just have a bunch of content. So come to factoryforgood.com and come check it out.
All right. Thanks for your time. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc., Schramm Financial Group, is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Any opinions of those are of the speaker and not necessarily those of Raymond James. This material is being provided for informational purposes only and is not a complete description, nor is it a recommendation. There is no guarantee that these statements, opinions, or forecasts provided will prove to be correct. Investing involves risk, and you may incur a profit or a loss regardless of strategy selected. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Prior to making an investment decision, please consult with your financial advisor about your individual situation. Raymond James is not affiliated with any guests on this podcast.